All right, everyone. We're going to try something new. I don't normally broadcast live, but I'm going to give it a shot here just to roll the dice accordingly. I am also in the process of trying a few things out, so it's going to be a little crazy around this thing. Of course, got to make sure I have all the things I need necessary. Got my my Coke here, and I'm sitting here looking at you guys, trying to adjust the seat accordingly. So I'm going to ask that you be patient with me. And of course, once I'm done, I'm going to put this as a podcast as well. So if you're listening to this for the first time, be patient and roll with me. All right. So today I want to talk about non compete agreements. And let me just be clear when I talk about those. At some particular point in your professional career, you're going to have someone, if you're lucky in the course of going through your evolution and so forth, you're going to get the opportunity to get offered what's called a non compete agreement. Now, some of you are going to probably say to yourselves, what the heck is a non compete? A non compete is a legal document that effectively means that they're going to hire you, but effectively contingent upon the fact that when you leave, you can't use you can't use anything that they taught you or anything in the course of your instructions with them. Excuse me, for a period of time of about whatever time they specify. So the short answer to it is effectively it is a legal document by which it's a legal document by which you are not permitted to use anything that you learn from them for a very finite period of time for a very finite geographical region. So that's kind of the long and short of it. It's a nice way of basically saying, "Hey, we're going to teach you things and give you access to things, but guess what? You can't use that information for a specific period of time, or in this particular geographical area, or in these particular industries." Let me kind of add this out here as well. Now, some of you are probably sitting here going, "Why would you ever sign something like that?" Well, the reality is that in the grander scheme of things, this is actually not an uncommon practice. So what ends up happening is most of us, when we start early into our careers, we don't get exposed to anything like that. We don't get the opportunity to have those types of agreements, mainly because the types of jobs and work that we do, are, for lack of better words, not really they're I hate to say they're not important. It's just it's easy you're replaceable. It's easy to find somebody to kind of take those spots. So what ends up happening is that as you acquire more skills and you advance to higher levels, you're going to get offered the opportunity to engage in practices where the employer has a vested interest to make sure that you don't take the things that you learn being with them and take it to someone else. So what they do is they have what's called a non-compete agreement, which what they get you to sign that effectively says, hey, when you leave here, you can't do this for this period of time for here. Okay. Okay. Now, let's just be clear about this. When you start getting into the realm of what I call non-compete agreements, you're probably finding yourself in a financial bracket where you probably are going to give a lot of serious thought to it. Meaning they're going to be shooting you the kind of money and opportunities and so forth where you say to yourself, you know what? I'm all right with that. If they want me to do that, this is fine. So when talking about a non-compete, I want to talk to you about three aspects of it that you need to be mindful of. Before you sign it, after you sign it and you start your employment agreement with your employer, and then, excuse me, I'm saying it wrong, jumping around. Before you sign it, which is right before you sign the document, during, which is after you've signed it, you start your employment agreement, and then after, which is the point where you've decided you're going to leave your employer or leave this arrangement that you have, and you're now trying to decide what the heck am I going to do with this document. So let's take each one step at a time. First is the before. I cannot say this enough. Speak to an attorney. I know, and you're going to say, "Oh, that's what all you attorneys say. You always say go speak to an attorney." Yeah, because the reason why is that because an attorney is going to look to see certain language that's going to let them know that this is something that may be overly broad or overly restricted. In other words, they may be telling you, they may say, okay, if you're going to sign this, you need to tell them they need to give you this A, B, C, D, and E because they're putting too many restrictions on you. Now, some of you are going to say, well, any old kind of attorney, ideally, someone who works in the employment law arena that's probably your best bet. But just from a general legal standpoint, because most attorneys, when we're kind of taught contracts, so we can typically see stuff that catches our attention. So my biggest thing is right out the gate. I mean, right out the yin yang is that when you get this document, if you can get it to an attorney, let them look at it first. Let me throw this out here as well, because every now and then I've seen this happen where people will have you sign it, ask you to sign a non-compete, and you'll say, "Well, I want to let an attorney take a look." Well, I don't know if we got enough time. We may not be able to hold this open, but if you need to, just know we got other people out there. When they start giving you that hoo ha ha about they need you to sign it right away without giving you the opportunity to have legal counsel take a look at it, you should be very concerned. So I often tell people, hey, listen, keep it 100. If you when you get a document like that, let an attorney review it first. Now, this is in the before stage. Even then, after you've had an attorney look at it, you might say to yourself, this might not be a bad deal, because what ends up happening is, like I said, when you're in the realm where you're starting to now get offered a non-compete agreement, you're probably looking at monies and benefits that are so substantially more than what you're used to getting that you will be willing to sign this document. And I often tell people, when you get a non-compete, please don't look at today. Look at what happens tomorrow, because you don't realize that when you're signing it today, you're looking at it in terms of how much money I got and how much money it's going to get me and how much of a position it's going to put you in. But at some particular point, you're going to transition out of this arrangement, and what you sign today is going to restrict you tomorrow. So that's the first thing I tell you. So that's the before aspect, which really is summed up into two things. One, when they get this thing to you, let an attorney take a look at it. And two, just be mindful of what the restrictions are when you're trying to weigh the comparison between the great things that they're offering you and the restrictions they're putting on you. So that's the first. Second is during. And the reason why I say during is because during the time after you've signed it and you're working, what you start to realize is that the longer you work for this particular employer, the more skills you acquire, the more relationships you build, the more exposure you get, the reputation that you build, the brand that you create. All of a sudden, you're now being put into these various spaces where you're getting access to information and access to people and relationships and access to things of such a magnitude that you didn't have before. And so now, when you first signed it, you were kind of green to the world. But now you've signed it and you're on board and you're rocking and rolling and you're realizing, man, this thing is awesome. I mean, I'm rocking in this place now. And guess what ends up happening? I cannot tell you the number of times I've had people tell me this, where they start working, they start realizing how many great opportunities that they could possibly have outside of what they're doing. They've completely forgotten about the non compete. I mean, real talk. It's just completely gone out their mind. I'm not trying to say that's a bad thing. I'm just saying they have completely forgotten about it altogether. And you're like, oh my goodness. So the longer they go on, trust me, that thing falls to the wayside. So now it's one thing if you get into a new job and you're there for like a few months or so forth like that. But now when we're talking a few years in, now you're like, woo, you're starting to now look at the skills that you've acquired, looked into the relationships you've built, and you're starting to say to yourself, this might be a great time to transition to something bigger, badder, brighter, and better. And that's typically how it flows. So all of a sudden, you start looking at things from a different standpoint and saying to yourself, with all of the things that has happened here that has been to my benefit, maybe I should give a serious, let me say this again, maybe I should give serious consideration to transitioning out, which then ends up happening, moving you from the during to the after. Now, at this particular point, this is where it gets really wild, because at this point, you're now making the determination of, okay, now I am going to leave. And in the course of going through all of your mindsets of what are you going, what you need to do in terms of how you're going to transition out, dust off that non-compete agreement that you signed 3, 4, 5 years ago. Yes, that's still in effect. Then all of a sudden, you look at that thing and you realize that a lot of the skills that you've acquired or a lot of the things you've done, and it gets even wonkier when you come there with certain skills already. And it basically constricts you. And let me tell you how non-competes really give you issue. Imagine when you go to a job with skills. It's one thing if you go there and you don't have anything and they basically built you up and that's what you're using and you're trying to leverage to your benefit, and they're trying to leverage it against you so that you don't do it to their detriment. But imagine when you come there with skills. certain skills. And the non-compete, and I've seen these where they're worded in such a way, not only can you not use what you learned there, but they basically worded in such a way it basically prevents you from the skills and the things that you acquired before you got there. And most times people don't think about it like that until they are at this point where they're getting ready to leave. And then they look at this non-compete and they realize, holy crap. So if I decide to go work for this employer, or if I decide to open up my own thing, I got to move within the confines of these restrictions. And I look at them and say, yeah, that's exactly what the deal is. But the funny part is that people will come back to me and they'll say, okay, they'll say, Reeves, I got this document here. And I'll look at it, I say, okay. And so there's first thing I do when I look and I say is how long is it? And, so if so where I'm looking, you're saying, well, what are you looking for? I'm looking to see if it's longer than a year or not. Because I remember one of my mentors. I don't know if the law is still the same way, which is why I said talk to an attorney. I haven't practiced this area in a number of years, so I don't want you to hold on to what I'm saying because every jurisdiction is a little different. I'm not bar licensed in every state and so forth, so I can only tell you from the context from my time when I was in Florida. A couple of things that I look for. One, how long is it? If it's over, if it's under a year, some courts might view that as being reasonable. If it's over 2 years, some courts may view that as being unreasonable. Anything in between 1 to 2, could be a little wonky. Geographical area, that tends to be really wild because, back in the day, it was physical location. So if it's basically your state, they might give you a pass. When they started talking about regions and national and internationally, we're basically saying you can't do anything anywhere. That presents a little bit of problem. Then, if it basically encompasses what I call the world, meaning it's one thing if they spell out specific things you can't use, like various lists, specific employers, things of that nature. Then it's a little bit easier because you have plenty of notice of knowing exactly where those lanes are. But if they have this big "we are the world," basically any employer that used to do business with us, any employer that's going to do business with us, like what in the HE? So I'll then look at that and I'll see all these provisions and I'm like, yeah, this is what you got to worry about. This is what you got to worry about. And I can tell you like clockwork, I'll have somebody ask me this question. So, Reeves, if I break this thing and just do it anyway, what then? And then I look at them and then I start going old school. I'm like, yeah, if you want me to ask you to answer that question, I got a two-prong way of doing it. You can either run clean or you can ride dirty. Yes, that's right. I said it. And you're like, what do you mean by run clean and ride dirty? I said, when you're running clean, effectively what you're doing is you're honoring the terms of the non-compete agreement. In other words, you signed a contract, you're honoring it. They're telling you you can't do this. You're now leaving the job. So if they say you can't do this for a year or a couple of years, whatever the case may be, guess what? Boom. That's what you're doing. So in that particular instance, you're satisfying the terms. It's going to suck because some instances the non-compete basically knocks you out of what you used to doing for a finite period of time. So you've got that to worry about. So imagine basically doing a particular job for a certain number of years to only be told you can't do it for this amount of years. So that's a particular issue. That's the run clean version. The running dirty is what I tell the riding dirty portion is when I say when you decide to breach the contract because the employer almost never breaches because the person who wants you in the contract they want to keep you in that contract because they're doing it to protect themselves against you being a potential competitor. What I'm saying, and I'm not trying to be funny, is when I say this, I'm not, and I know it may sound goofy when I say it out here, but the reality is when I say this, and this is not even trying to be a smarty, it's just that the reality is that the employer is never going to say, you know what, we're going to breach it. You can do whatever you want. No, no. Now, if you have a relationship with this firm or this company or this business, and you tell them that you want to head out, are they going to honor the contract, or do you want to, can they let you out of it? They might. I'm not saying not every employer is the same. They might. Now, here's the kicker, and this is not me being funny at all. Invariably, it's the person who signed it, meaning somebody like you, signs it. And then what happens is that you breach. And you're like, what do you mean by breach? Well, you go work for a competitor, you go work for another employer, you go create your own business, you do those things. Now, here's the thing that you don't realize there is no such thing as a non compete police, but the employer or the person you signed an agreement with can take you to court. They can take you to court and basically sue you for breach of contract. Now, maybe from a personal standpoint, you say, no big deal. They can't get nothing from me. I ain't got no deep pockets. Yeah. But imagine the situation where you go to work for an employer. Let's say you go for another employer who knew that you were working for this company. Now, when your employer sues you for breach, guess what they're also going to do? They're going to sue your employer, the new employer you're with, typically for what we call tortious interference with business practices. That's a nice legal way of saying, yeah, because you hired this person who knows what I do, you're hurting my business. So if that's how you get down, I'm suing that person for breaking the contract, but I'm suing you for hiring them because you should have known better. And I want money for compensation for damages for you hiring them. Now, let me just tell you something. Let's assume that the other employer had no clue that you had a non-compete, and all of a sudden this gets in their face. They're gonna be looking at you cross-eyed. Yeah, and there's a very decent chance, depending on the circumstances, they may terminate the relationship with you. And more importantly, they may find themselves in a situation where not only do they terminate, they may say, okay, if we get sued, we're going to find a way to kind of countersue you so that any damages we got to pay, we're going to get the money back from you. And you're like, wait a minute. No, because this is the consequences of what I call riding daddy. Because you took the chance. You took the chance and decided this is the contract I went into. I'm going to take a chance that the other employer is not going to come after me. So all that to say this in a nutshell, let me see if I can sum this all up at one time. Non-competes serve a very specific purpose. They're ultimately, at the end of the day, designed to protect a particular entity who is looking to engage to a relationship with probably somebody like yourself in such a way so that this way the skills, the knowledge and experiences and sometimes intellectual property and just access to information that they're giving you to could never be used against them in a professional setting. So this is a normal practice. What I often tell people is that if you find yourself being put in a position where a non-compete agreement is a distinct possibility, talk to a lawyer when that document has been provided to you, and then give serious thought to asking yourself the question: what is the likelihood? Because you don't have a crystal ball. So, what is the likelihood that in the future you may find yourself wanting to transition away, and how will this restrict me? So thank you everybody for tuning in and being patient. I want you to be mindful that I'm going to be doing more of these, more so on my members only. So if you haven't signed up to join my YouTube members only, there's going to be quite a few of those live streams that I'm going to do there. But I decided that I'm going to probably do these live streams every now and then and so forth, probably about 2 or 3 times a month. This is my first one. So I off please, I know people are like, first of all, you gonna do something with that crazy background of yours? I'm like, hey, no, so just roll with it. Any topics you want me to do live, I'll be more than happy to do so. But again, thanks everybody for tuning in. Take care of yourself and be blessed.